The last woman who truly knew Robert Wagner has finally spoken, and what she said has sent a quiet tremor through everything Hollywood spent 4 decades trying to bury. Stefanie Powers was 82 when she sat down with Variety, and she still carried the composure of someone trained never to flinch in public. For over 40 years, she had referred to Wagner only as an old friend, deflecting questions with the practiced grace of a woman who understood that some silences protect more than they reveal. What shifted wasn't her loyalty to him. What shifted was the weight of what she had read in 2012, when she accessed Natalie Wood's autopsy file and found pages missing from the version the public had seen in 1981. She described circular bruises around Natalie's wrists and deep abrasions near her ribs, injuries absent from the official report. Someone didn't want the world to know Natalie struggled, she told Variety. They preferred the idea that she simply fell. Those 2 sentences landed harder than any direct accusation, because they came from the one person who had spent years closest to the man at the center of the mystery. Powers and Wagner had met on the set of Hart in 1979, and their on-screen chemistry made them television's most celebrated partnership of that era. She once described him as the person who understood her rhythm and emotions better than anyone. During the final seasons of their show, she watched him grow withdrawn, stopping mid-scene to stare at nothing, sometimes sitting silently for hours between takes with his eyes empty. He lived like a man carrying a shadow, she later recalled. For years, she had read it as grief. Looking back, she was no longer certain. The night Natalie Wood died began ordinarily enough. On November 28, 1981, Wagner, Natalie, and her Brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken had dinner at Doug's Harbor Reef on Catalina Island, a restaurant overlooking the water. Wagner later described the evening as pleasant, but the restaurant staff remembered something else entirely. One waiter told the Los Angeles Times that Wagner slammed his glass on the table, while Natalie simply lowered her head and said nothing. Another diner nearby overheard Walken tell her she was born to act, followed immediately by Wagner's cold reply that she should be home with her husband and kids. Back aboard the yacht Splendor, around 10 that night, the atmosphere had turned. Captain Dennis DeVerne told CBS's 48 Hours that he heard bottles breaking, raised voices, and then silence so complete it was its own kind of alarm. Wagner reported Natalie missing at 1:30 in the morning, but harbor witnesses had heard a woman screaming nearly 2 hours before that call went out. That gap was what first led investigators to suspect the delay had been deliberate. Her body surfaced at dawn on November 29th, floating less than a kilometer from Avalon Harbor, dressed in a red nightgown with a life jacket fastened backward and socks still on her feet. The Los Angeles coroner ruled it accidental drowning due to intoxication, but Coroner Thomas Noguchi had written something different in his private notes, a line that never made it into the official report. These injuries are not consistent with a natural fall. The bruises on her wrists, knees, and arms were documented. The dinghy she was said to have used to leave the yacht was found tied securely with no evidence of recent use. No tests were conducted on fingernail residue, despite scratches visible on her wrists, and crime scene photographs vanished entirely, only resurfacing 3 decades later in 2011. That was the year the official account began to collapse under its own weight. DeVerne publicly reversed his earlier statements, admitting he had stayed silent too long, and confirmed that Wagner had been in a rage that night, throwing things and stopping anyone from turning on lights to search for her. Natalie's younger sister Lana Wood, who had spent years appearing on NBC, Inside Edition, and Good Morning America, asking why everyone with knowledge of that night had gone quiet, filed a civil lawsuit demanding the investigation be fully reopened. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department made it official. The case was active again. By 2018, Wagner was listed as a person of interest, and the cause of death was reclassified from accidental to undetermined. His response to every development was the same. His lawyer issued a brief statement reading there is nothing new to say, and Wagner himself offered nothing. The history that led to that night on Catalina Island stretches back through decades of Hollywood celebrity and broken marriages. In the early 1950s, Fox was positioning Wagner as the heir to Clark Gable, a young star with a face that sold magazine covers and a career that seemed to have no ceiling. The affairs accumulated early and visibly. He was photographed leaving film sets late at night with Joan Collins, linked openly to Swedish model Anita Ekberg in Confidential magazine, and involved for years with Barbara Stanwyck, 23 years his senior, whose films like Double Indemnity had made her an American cinema institution. Journalist Rex Reed later reported that Stanwyck had said Wagner made her feel young again, and their involvement ran for several years, despite the industry's hostility toward the age gap. Natalie Wood entered his life at a Christmas party thrown by director Nicholas Ray. She was 18, already known from Rebel Without a Cause, and rising fast in film, while Wagner was working to rebuild a career that had stalled. Their 1957 wedding at the Beverly Hills Hotel was broadcast live on ABC. Life magazine ran them on the cover under the headline, "America's Golden Couple." And for a moment, the label seemed to fit. Behind that image, Natalie's career kept climbing, while Wagner's struggled to keep pace. A close friend of hers later told People magazine that he loved her, but couldn't bear that she was the more successful one. By 1961, photos of him with Ekberg had appeared in print, and the marriage was finished. Natalie filed for divorce, writing only 2 words on the record: irreconcilable differences. Wagner remarried in 1963, had a daughter named Katie, and that marriage ended too. Then, in 1972, at Frank Sinatra's Malibu home, he and Natalie found each other again, dancing to "The Way You Look Tonight," as though none of the years between had happened. Notes from their Beverly Hills marriage counselor Dr. Eugene Landy later leaked, showing that Natalie had told the therapist she feared her husband's sudden bursts of anger. Powers confirmed that energy directly from her own experience, describing Wagner as someone capable of shifting within seconds from warmth into someone entirely different. A darkness, she said, only the women who loved him could truly understand. Natalie's estate at the time of her death was valued at roughly $3 million, including her Beverly Hills home, a Palm Springs retreat, and royalties from West Side Story and Rebel Without a Cause. Her 1978 will directed everything to her daughters Natasha and Courtney, with Wagner named as their full guardian. Within months of her death, he had sold the Palm Springs property along with much of her jewelry and personal art collection. Lana Wood told Entertainment Tonight that no one genuinely grieving would liquidate a loved one's belongings so quickly after their death. A scholarship fund established in Natalie's name was dissolved just 2 years later, with no public explanation offered. By 1984, his name appeared on nearly every commercial arrangement tied to her image, from film re-release rights to archived photo republication. And Vanity Fair would later write the line that circulated for years: "Robert Wagner is living too well in his grief." When his memoir, Pieces of My Heart, arrived in 2008, Wagner devoted more than 70 pages to Natalie, describing her death as a tragic accident with no one to blame, and characterizing Davern as a loyal man who had done his best. Davern had already contradicted that account publicly and in detail. Marin Orth of Vanity Fair wrote that Wagner told the story as though he were the only victim of that tragedy. Lana Wood told Access Hollywood without hesitation, "He wrote it to hide his guilt, not to tell the truth." Powers received an advance copy with a handwritten note from Wagner reading, "This is my truth," and she later admitted she never fully believed it. "He writes beautifully," she said, "but I can feel the chapters that are missing." A second autobiography followed in 2014, built around nostalgic evenings with Cary Grant, dances with Elizabeth Taylor and Sophia Loren, and an unverifiable mention of a romance with Audrey Hepburn. Critic Janice Min of The Hollywood Reporter put it plainly: "Wagner doesn't need to prove the truth. He just needs to tell it well enough that people forget to ask." He eventually settled in Aspen, Colorado with Jill St. John, whom he had married in 1990 and who had once been among Natalie's closest friends. The press came less and less, but Stefanie Powers, at 82, decided the story didn't belong to him alone to finish. Her words don't come from rivalry or grievance. They come from someone who spent years inside the same world, who watched the grief up close across seasons of filming and long private conversations, and who eventually concluded that loyalty to a friend does not extend to protecting a version of events that may never have been accurate. Lana Wood once told The Guardian she wasn't seeking revenge, only an answer to what really happened to her sister. That question has circled the waters off Catalina Island for more than 40 years, and the woman who may have been closer to the truth than anyone else is only now, near the end of a long career in American television and film, willing to say aloud what she saw standing right next to the man everyone called Hollywood's last perfect gentleman.